Daniel Cross lived a quiet life on the colony of Erebos 4, a distant world that circled a pale yellow sun. The colony was not very big, just a cluster of domes and metal buildings spread across a red desert. The horizon was always wide, and the nights were full of bright stars. For Daniel, life was simple. He worked as a repairman for machines, helped in the water plant when needed, and spent most of his evenings in his small home on the edge of the settlement. He had not asked for excitement. In fact, he liked the peace. Humanity had traveled far into the stars, but he was not a soldier or a pioneer, just a man who wanted a steady life. Yet peace often comes with loneliness, and Daniel sometimes felt that weight pressing on his chest. One ordinary morning, the door chime rang. Daniel opened it, expecting maybe a neighbor. Instead, two officials in gray uniforms stood there holding a small tablet. "Mr. Cross?" one of them asked. "Yes?" Daniel answered, confused. "You have been assigned service support from the Interstellar Employment Bureau. Please confirm delivery." "Delivery?" Daniel repeated. He had ordered no supplies. The official tapped the tablet. "Assignment ID 774A1 Thrin Domestic Assistant." Effective immediately, Daniel blinked. "Wait, a what?" The officials stepped aside, and behind them stood a tall figure. For a moment, Daniel thought she wore armor, because her skin seemed metallic. But no, it was her. She was an alien. Her skin was smooth and silver, almost shining under the twin suns. Her eyes were large, with a faint glow of blue. Her hair was white, falling neatly over her shoulders. She wore a simple uniform, dark fabric, long sleeves, boots that reached her knees. She carried a small case. "I am Elira of the Thrin," she said in a calm voice, "assigned to this residence. I will serve and maintain as instructed." Daniel's mouth went dry. He looked at the officials. This must be a mistake. "I didn't ask for a maid." The official only shrugged. "The Bureau balances assignments between colonists. You were chosen." He held out the tablet. "Sign to confirm. Refusal requires formal appeal, which can take 3 months. During that time, the worker remains here anyway." Daniel sighed. He did not want to argue with bureaucracy. He pressed his thumb on the screen. The officials nodded and left. Now he stood awkwardly with the alien woman in his doorway. Come in," Daniel said finally. Elira stepped inside, her movements precise, almost graceful. She placed her case near the wall and looked around the room. The house was small, just a living area, kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. It was clean enough, though not spotless. "I will begin with cleaning," Elira said at once. "You don't have to rush," Daniel replied quickly. "I mean, you just arrived. Sit, maybe?" Elira tilted her head slightly, as if the suggestion confused her. But she obeyed, sitting on the edge of the chair. Her posture was straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "So, Elira, was it? You're from the Thrin?" "Yes, what made you come here?" "It was not my choice," she said plainly. "Our contracts are arranged with human colonies. We serve for fixed years. It is our way." Daniel felt a small pang of guilt. To him, she looked more like a guest than a servant. Yet the Bureau had sent her with that purpose. He tried to lighten the mood. "Well, I don't need much. Just don't break the coffee machine and we'll get along fine." Elira blinked. "I do not know what a coffee machine is," Daniel laughed. "Then maybe that's the first thing you'll learn here." Life with Elira, the next few days were strange. Elira worked quietly around the house. She was efficient, too efficient, in fact. She would polish surfaces Daniel never thought about, organize tools by size and weight, and even align his shoes in perfect rows. She spoke little unless spoken to, and when she did, her voice was steady and formal. At meals, she often watched Daniel, not rudely but with a strange focus. He would eat and she would tilt her head as if studying his every move. One evening, Daniel asked, "Do you ever eat human food?" "I can digest it," Elira answered, "but I have my own supplies." She opened her case and showed him sealed nutrient bars marked with alien symbols. Daniel nodded. "Must taste boring." Elira paused, then replied, "It has purpose. Taste is secondary." Her words made Daniel smile. Humans would never say such a thing. To them, food was joy, memory, and comfort. For Elira, it was simply fuel. Outside the home, whispers began. Some colonists disliked alien workers, saying it was risky to let them live among humans. Others said it was fine, that the Thrin were obedient and caused no trouble. Daniel kept quiet. He did not see Elira as dangerous. She was strange, yes, but never threatening. Yet he noticed something odd. She often lingered near windows at night, looking at the stars. Her expression, usually calm, would soften for a moment. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked once. Elira answered without turning. "About freedom." Daniel frowned. "Freedom? Don't you have it?" Her blue eyes met his. "Not as you understand it." The conversation ended there, but Daniel did not forget it. The boldness in her eyes. 1 week after her arrival, Daniel returned home late from the repair station. The day had been long, full of broken pumps and leaking pipes. He wanted nothing more than to collapse into bed. When he entered, he found Elira waiting in the living room. The house was spotless, as always, but her expression was different tonight. She stood very still, her silver skin glowing faintly under the ceiling light. Her eyes were locked on him, more intense than ever before. "Daniel Cross," she said softly. He blinked. "Yes?" "I must ask you something." Her tone was not the usual formal one. It carried weight, almost like a secret pressing against her lips. Daniel placed his tools on the table. "All right. What is it?" Elira hesitated. For the first time since he met her, she looked uncertain. Her hands tightened slightly at her sides. Her gaze did not leave his face. "I must ask you something bold." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. He tried to smile. "Bold like? You want a raise? Or extra cleaning supplies?" But deep inside he knew it was something else. Her eyes told him so. They glowed with a strange mix of fear and hope, as if she was standing at the edge of a choice that could not be undone. And in that moment, Daniel realized his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. The night was quiet on Erebos 4. The desert winds brushed softly against the domes of the colony, and faint lights glimmered from the settlement towers. Inside Daniel's small home, the silence felt heavy, broken only by Elira's steady breathing as she stood before him. Daniel waited. He had seen her polish floors, organize shelves, and even realign his tools, but he had never seen her hesitate before. She was always precise, always certain, yet now she seemed caught between fear and determination. "What is it you want to ask me?" Daniel said gently. Elira looked straight at him, her glowing blue eyes unblinking. "I want you to teach me something that no one of my kind has dared to learn." Daniel frowned. "Teach you? About what? House repairs, cooking? I'm not really a teacher." "No," Elira said, her voice firm. "I want you to teach me how to live as a human does. How to resist, how to defy." Daniel's mind went blank for a moment. He thought he had misheard her. "Resist, defy? You mean rebellion?" Elira nodded. "Yes, that is the word. Rebellion, independence, refusal to obey without reason. These things are not allowed among the Thrin. But I want to learn." Daniel stared at her. He almost laughed, but the seriousness in her face stopped him. "Why me? I'm just a repairman. I fix pumps. I don't lead armies." "You are human," Elira answered calmly. "And humans are known for this. I have read reports, stories, and rumors. Your kind never accepts chains. Even when small in number, humans fight. You have a word, freedom. Teach me that." Daniel rubbed his forehead. This was insane. Teaching an alien Maid rebellion? The Bureau would lock him away if they ever found out. "Look, Elira, if the overseers hear about this, you'll be punished. And maybe me too. Why risk it?" Her gaze did not waver. "Because I do not want to spend my existence as a tool. My people are strong, but we obey without thought. We serve, we bend, yet when I came here I saw how humans live. Even the poorest colonist speaks with choice in his voice. I want that. I want to be more than my orders." Daniel felt a strange pull inside him. There was no trembling in her tone, no sign of trickery. It was pure desire, desire to be free. He sat down slowly. "You understand what you're asking? This isn't like learning how to cook. Freedom is not something you're given. You fight for it. You suffer for it. It's dangerous." "I understand." Her answer came without pause. Daniel leaned back, thinking hard. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell her it was impossible. But when he looked at her eyes, he saw the same fire he had once seen in human history books. Rebels on Earth who had stood against kings. Colonists who had refused tyrants. Explorers who had crossed the stars against all odds. And here she was, a silver-skinned alien maid, asking him for the same thing. At last, Daniel sighed. "All right. I'll try. But I'm no hero, Elira. I'll just show you what I know. Her lips curved slightly, almost like a smile. That is all I ask. The first lessons. The next morning, Daniel woke to find Elira waiting at the table, sitting with perfect posture. You will teach me today, she said simply. Daniel scratched his head. You don't waste time, do you? I must learn quickly. Observation is not enough. Daniel poured himself coffee. He thought about where to begin. What was the essence of human defiance? What simple thing could he teach? All right, he said at last. Lesson 1, say no, Elira blinked. No? Yes, the word itself. Try it, she tilted her head. No, Daniel shook his head. Not like that. You said it as if you were asking permission to say it. Say it with force. Say it as if you refuse an order. Elira straightened her shoulders. Her glowing eyes narrowed slightly. No. This time the word rang firm in the air. Daniel grinned. Better. That's the first step. Humans don't accept everything. We question, we deny. We choose. Elira repeated it several times, each stronger than the last. Then she asked, but when I say no to my overseer, they punish me. Daniel nodded. Yes, that's the cost. But it's also the power. If you say no and stand firm, they lose control. That's why it's bold. For the first time, Elira seemed to truly understand. Small defiance in the following days, Daniel gave her small tests. When he asked her to fetch water, he told her she had the right to refuse. At first she struggled, her voice trembling. But soon she began to do it naturally. No, Daniel Cross, I choose not to, she said one morning. Daniel laughed. Perfect. Now you're starting to sound like a human. But the lessons were not just about words. Daniel showed her human stories. Tales of revolutions, speeches about liberty. History lessons of Earth where people had stood against impossible odds. Elira listened with deep focus, her glowing eyes fixed on the screen. You burned your own ships to stop retreat, she whispered once, after hearing about an ancient general. You risked everything for victory. That's what makes us human, Daniel said softly. We risk everything when it matters. Elira nodded, and he saw something shift inside her. The silver calm of her face seemed to glow with a new energy. The words Elira spoke on that night stayed in Daniel's mind for hours, then for days. She had stood in front of him with eyes full of determination, asking not for rest, not for comfort, not for more food or better pay. What she asked was something that seemed far greater. She wanted him to teach her the human way of thinking, the way of independence. Daniel had not answered right away. He had laughed nervously and told her she was asking the wrong man. He was no soldier, no leader, no teacher. He was only a repairman. But Elira had not looked away. She had said, You are human. That is enough. Now, as the sun rose again on the red deserts of Erebos 4, Daniel sat at his table with his coffee cup in hand, staring at Elira. She was not cleaning or arranging today. She was sitting across from him, her silver hands resting neatly on the table. You are serious about this? Daniel asked. Yes, she replied simply. Daniel shook his head. Elira, I don't think you understand. Teaching you to be, well, rebellious, that's dangerous. If your overseers find out, they will punish me, not you, she said calmly. That doesn't make me feel better. Still, she said, leaning forward slightly, you must teach me. Daniel sighed. He had never met anyone so direct, so unshaken by doubt. There was something in her voice that reminded him of history lessons from Earth, of people who once rose against empires. She sounded like she was waiting for her chance. All right, Daniel said finally, but we start small. Rebellion isn't about shouting or fighting first. It starts here. He tapped his head. Elira tilted her head.
In thought?
Exactly. In thought. Lesson 1. Saying no. Their first lesson was almost laughably simple. Daniel asked her to refuse him. Tell me no, he said. No, Elira replied without pause. Daniel blinked. Well, that was quick. But, she added, I feel no different. Daniel chuckled. That's because you don't mean it yet. Here, let's try again. He leaned back in his chair. Elira, polish my boots. She rose instantly, moving to obey. No, wait. Daniel stopped her, holding up his hand. Don't do it. Say no, Elira froze. She turned, her expression almost pained. Her lips parted, but the word would not come. See? Daniel said softly. It's not easy. You've been trained all your life to obey. Saying no is like trying to walk against a storm. But you have to practice. Elira stood very still. At last she whispered, "No." It was quiet, almost broken. Daniel smiled. "Better, do it again." This time she said it louder. "No." By the end of the day, she could look Daniel in the eyes and say it with strength. "No," Daniel laughed, clapping his hands. "There we go. Congratulations, you just won your first battle." Elira did not laugh, but her blue eyes glowed brighter as if a new light had awakened in them. Lesson 2. Question Orders. The next day, Daniel gave her another task. "Elira, clean the windows." "Why?" she asked immediately. Daniel grinned. "Perfect. That's the second step. Don't just follow, ask why. Make the one giving orders explain themselves." She looked at him carefully. "And if the reason is acceptable, then you can choose to do it," Daniel explained. "The point is not to disobey everything. The point is to choose for yourself." She thought about this for a long moment. "Choice," she whispered. For the Thrinn, choice was rare. Orders were their law, tradition their chain. But now Daniel was breaking links one by one. Lesson 3. Improvising by the end of the week. Daniel decided she was ready for something harder. He gave her a broken tool and said, "Fix it." Elira studied it. "I do not have instructions." "Exactly," Daniel said. "You don't need instructions. You just figure it out. Humans call it improvising." She frowned at the tool, turning it over in her hands. At first she tried to repeat what she had seen Daniel do before, but soon she realized she needed to adjust, to test, to fail, and try again. After an hour, the tool clicked back into place. She looked up at him with clear pride. Daniel whistled. "See, you don't need a manual for everything. Sometimes you trust yourself." For the first time since arriving, Elira allowed herself a small smile. A growing bond day by day, their lessons continued. Daniel was surprised at how fast she learned. She was not only intelligent but eager. Every word he spoke she held on to. Every story of human rebellions, of free thinkers, of explorers who went beyond rules, she listened as if it were a sacred text. Sometimes they spoke late into the night. Daniel told her about Earth, about great revolutions, about ordinary people who stood up when told to kneel. Elira asked endless questions. "Were they not afraid?" she asked once. "Of course they were," Daniel replied. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're afraid." Elira repeated the words softly, almost like a prayer. Doing what is right, even when afraid. As the days passed, Daniel noticed something else. Other alien workers in the colony had started watching. When Elira walked past, some looked at her with quiet curiosity. She was different and they could sense it. One evening, Daniel returned from work to find Elira outside, speaking to 2 other Thrinn. When they saw him, they quickly scattered. "What was that about?" he asked. "They ask me questions," Elira said. "They wonder why I walk differently, why I hold my head higher." Daniel frowned. "And what do you tell them?" "I tell them humans teach strange things." She looked at him then, her eyes steady. "But I do not tell them everything." "Not yet?" The overseers noticed it was not long before someone else noticed Elira's change. The overseers. The Bureau sent inspectors regularly to ensure the alien workers were behaving as expected. One afternoon, while Daniel was repairing pipes at the water plant, he received a call. "Cross inspector on the way to your home." "Just a heads up." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He rushed home to find a tall man in black uniform waiting at his door. "Mr. Cross," the inspector said smoothly. "Routine check. We need to see your assistant." Elira stood inside, her posture straight. When the inspector stepped toward her, she did not lower her gaze like the others usually did. "Name?" the inspector demanded. "Elira," she replied. "Designation?" "Independent," she said clearly. Daniel's heart stopped. That was not the answer she was supposed to give. The inspector narrowed his eyes. "Independent? No, you are Bureau property assigned for service. You will follow." Elira stood firm. "No." The word rang out like a strike of thunder. Daniel could hardly believe it. She had said it without hesitation, without fear. The inspector's face darkened. "You refuse?" "Yes," Elira said, her voice calm but unshakable. Outside, a few colonists and alien workers had gathered, drawn by the voices. They whispered among themselves. For the first time, they saw a Thrinn saying no to authority. Daniel stepped forward quickly. "She's under my roof. You can't just drag her out without cause." The inspector glared at him. "Do not interfere, human." But the damage was done. The crowd had seen. Elira had broken the chain. A dangerous spark that night. Daniel sat with Elira at the table again. His heart was still racing from the confrontation. "You realize what you did?" he asked. "Yes," she replied calmly. "You could have been taken away." "Then I would have been proof," Elira said. "Proof that choice is possible." Daniel rubbed his temples. "Elira, this is bigger than you realize. If word spreads, the overseers won't just ignore it. They'll crack down harder. Then they will show their fear," she said. Daniel looked at her, and for a moment he felt he was not speaking to a maid, not even to an alien. He was speaking to a leader in the making, and he could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The day after the inspector's visit, the colony buzzed with whispers. Everyone had heard what happened at Daniel's home. Some said the alien maid had gone mad. Others said she was brave. Some feared trouble would follow, while others secretly admired her. Daniel noticed it everywhere he went. People stopped talking when he walked into a room. Neighbors glanced at him with curiosity, some with quiet respect. For the first time, his quiet life was no longer invisible. Inside the house, Elira continued as though nothing unusual had happened. She still cleaned, still prepared her tasks, still spoke calmly. But Daniel could see the difference. She held herself taller now. She no longer looked down when spoken to. "You really shook them," Daniel said one evening, watching her fold laundry. Elira looked up. "Shook? You made them nervous. Even humans are talking about it." Her silver eyes glowed faintly. "Good, if they speak, then they think. And if they think, then change begins." Daniel sighed. "Change brings danger too." "I know," she replied. "But fear is not reason to stop." A growing fire. In the following days, more Thryn workers approached Elira in secret. Daniel often came home to find one or two standing at the edge of his yard, waiting to speak with her. They asked questions in hushed tones. "What did you say to the inspector? Did he punish you? Are you not afraid?" Elira answered each one carefully. She never told them everything, but she gave them seeds of thought. "I refused because refusal is a choice," she told one worker. "No, he did not punish me. He could not. Because others were watching. Yes, I was afraid, but I spoke anyway." The workers listened with wide eyes. Some left quickly, afraid to be seen. Others lingered, asking more questions. Daniel noticed that each time they left, they walked with their shoulders straighter. One night, as the twin moons rose over the desert, Daniel asked her, "Why are you doing this? Why risk so much?" Elira stood at the window, her silver skin shining in the pale light. "Because my people are chained, and chains are not life." Daniel could not argue with that. Tension in the streets. The overseers soon grew suspicious. Patrols increased. Inspectors visited more often. Warnings were sent out. Alien workers were to remain obedient or consequences would follow. But instead of silence, murmurs grew louder. More Thryn workers began hesitating when given orders. Some asked questions they never would have dared before. A few even said no. Daniel saw it with his own eyes at the water plant. A supervisor barked at a Thryn to lift heavy crates. The worker paused, looked at the crates, and simply said, "No." The room froze. The supervisor shouted, threatened, and finally called for security. But by then, every human and alien nearby had witnessed the refusal. The seed had spread. That night, Daniel returned home shaken. "It's spreading," he told Elira. She only nodded. "Good. Good?" Daniel repeated. "Elira, do you know what this means? The overseers won't just sit and watch. They'll crack down hard. They'll make examples of anyone who steps out of line. Then more will see their cruelty," Elira said simply. "And more will rise." Daniel rubbed his forehead. He had not wanted any of this. He was a repairman, not a leader of revolts. Yet somehow the spark had been lit in his very home. History lessons, if he could not stop it. Perhaps he could at least guide it. Daniel began sharing more of Earth's history with Elira, and with the small groups of workers who now gathered secretly at his home. He told them about the revolutions of old, about people who overthrew kings and empires. He spoke of freedom movements, of protests, of times when ordinary farmers and workers stood against armies. They were not stronger, Daniel explained. They had fewer weapons, fewer numbers. But they had will, and will is greater than fear. The workers listened with hungry eyes. They whispered the stories to each other later. Soon, phrases from Earth's past began appearing in their speech. Stand tall, no chains, we choose. Daniel sometimes worried. Were they ready for this? Was he giving them too much? But each time he saw their faces, he knew there was no turning back. The ultimatum. The overseers acted sooner than Daniel expected. One evening, loudspeakers across the colony crackled to life. "This is the Bureau of Order," a cold voice announced. "All colonists are reminded that alien workers are property under contract. Any worker found refusing orders will be removed. Any human found interfering will be punished. Compliance ensures peace. Resistance ensures discipline." The message repeated in Thrin language as well. Daniel sat at his table, his stomach sinking. "They're tightening the leash." Elira stood calmly by the window. "They are afraid." "Afraid or not, they mean it," Daniel said. "They'll come after you." "I know." Her calmness unsettled him. "Elira, if they take you, They will not," she interrupted firmly. Her eyes burned with quiet fire. "Because I will not go." The confrontation the next day, the inspector returned. This time he was not alone. 2 armed guards stood at his sides. "Mr. Cross," the inspector said coldly, "you will hand over the Thrin assistant. She is under investigation for insubordination." Daniel's throat went dry. He opened his mouth, but Elira stepped forward before he could speak. "I am here," she said clearly. "Then come with us," the inspector ordered. "No," Elira said. The guards shifted uneasily. The inspector's eyes narrowed. "You refuse again? Then we will take you by force." Elira raised her chin. "You may try. But know this. I belong to no one." Her voice rang out strong enough for the neighbors outside to hear. People began gathering again, humans and Thrin alike drawn by the voices. "Do not make a spectacle," the inspector snapped. But it was too late. A crowd was forming. The workers whispered among themselves, their eyes wide. Some nodded quietly as if agreeing with Elira's words. Daniel felt his heart pounding. He wanted to grab her arm, to pull her inside, to hide her. But he knew it was too late. She was not hiding anymore. A choice for the colony. The inspector raised his hand. "Guards!" Before he could finish, one of the Thrin workers in the crowd stepped forward. "She is right. We are not property." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Another worker added, "We are not chains." The inspector spun, furious. "Silence!" But the murmurs grew louder. More Thrin voices joined in, repeating the words, "Not property. Not chains. We choose." Daniel stood frozen, his heart hammering. It was happening. The fire was spreading openly. The inspector barked at the guards. "Break them up! Arrest the ringleaders." The guards looked uncertain. The crowd was too large now. Humans were mixed in as well, some standing beside the Thrin protectively. One colonist shouted, "Leave them alone. They've done nothing wrong." Another added, "If they want freedom, let them have it." The inspector's face turned red. He shouted threats, but his words were drowned by the growing chants. For the first time, Daniel saw fear in the eyes of authority. The human spirit that night, the colony was on edge. No arrests were made, but the overseers had retreated, vowing to return with more force. Everyone knew a storm was coming. Inside Daniel's home, workers gathered in secret. Some were trembling with fear. Others were trembling with excitement. "They will punish us all," one said. "They will take us away," another whispered. Elira stood before them, her silver skin glowing faintly in the lamplight. Her voice was steady. "They will try. But remember what Daniel told us. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting even when fear is heavy. If we stand together, they cannot take us all." Her words filled the room like fire. The workers sat straighter, their eyes shining. Daniel watched silently, realizing she was no longer just learning from him. She was becoming something far greater, a leader. When the meeting ended, and the others slipped away into the night, Daniel stayed behind with her. "You know they'll come back stronger," he said quietly. "Yes," Elira replied. "And you know what that means for us?" She looked at him, her eyes fierce. "It means we must be stronger too." Daniel nodded slowly. He felt a strange mix of dread and pride. This was no longer just about him or his quiet life. The colony itself stood on the edge of change. The colony of Arivos 4 was no longer the same. A week had passed since Elira had stood against the inspector, and the entire settlement trembled with tension. Workers whispered in alleys, Humans spoke carefully in their homes, and overseers doubled their patrols. Everyone felt that something was about to break. Daniel Cross could not sleep at night. He lay awake listening to the hum of the machines outside, wondering how his quiet life had turned into this storm. He had wanted only peace, yet somehow he had become part of something far larger. And at the center of it stood Elira. Preparing for the return each evening, workers gathered secretly at Daniel's home. Some came nervously, glancing over their shoulders. Others came boldly, ready to hear more. Daniel taught what he could: stories of Earth, lessons from history, ways of standing together. But it was Elira who truly carried the room. She spoke with calm strength, her words sharp and clear. They will return, she told them. They will come with force. They believe fear is stronger than choice, but they are wrong. Together we are stronger. Daniel often sat back watching her. She had changed so much since the day she first stepped into his home, silent and obedient. Now her voice carried like a leader, and her people listened. One night after the meeting, Daniel asked her quietly, "Are you ready for this? For what's coming?" Elira looked at him with steady blue eyes. "I was not ready before, but you taught me. Now I am." The ultimatum, the overseers did not wait long. At sunrise 2 days later, loudspeakers across the colony roared to life again. "This is the Bureau of Order," the cold voice declared. "The Thryn worker known as Elira is guilty of rebellion. She must be surrendered at once. If she is not delivered by nightfall, the colony will face collective punishment. This is your final warning." The message echoed again and again. Daniel felt his stomach twist. Collective punishment, he knew what that meant. Reduced rations, restricted water, workers taken away by force. Even humans would suffer. Elira, however, stood calm. "As expected," she said. "Expected?" Daniel snapped. "Elira, they're threatening everyone. Not just you. The whole colony." "Yes," she replied softly. "Because they are afraid. They know if one voice becomes many, their chains break." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "What do? We do what humans do," she said. "We stand together." The gathering that evening, the central square of the colony filled with people. Humans stood shoulder to shoulder with Thryn workers. Fear flickered in their eyes, but determination burned brighter. At the center stood Elira, her silver skin glowing under the lamps. Daniel stood beside her, his heart racing. When the overseers arrived, they came in force. Dozens of guards in dark uniforms marched into the square, weapons ready. The inspector walked at the front, his face hard. "People of Erebos 4, he called out. "You have been warned. Hand over the rebel, and your colony will be spared." Silence hung for a long moment. Then Elira stepped forward. "I am here," she said. Her voice carried clear across the square. "But I do not surrender." "I do not belong to you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The inspector's eyes narrowed. "You will come by force then." But before the guards could move, a voice rang out from the crowd. A human shouted, "She's right!"
"She is not property."
Another voice followed, this time a Thryn. "We choose our own path." Then more voices joined, humans and aliens together, shouting words that Daniel had taught them from Earth's past. "No chains. We choose freedom." The square shook with their cries. The standoff. The inspector raised his hand. "Silence them." But the guards hesitated. The crowd was huge, united and unyielding. For every guard, there were 10 colonists staring back, refusing to move. Daniel felt his chest tighten. This was the moment. This was the line. He stepped forward beside Elira and called out, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "If you want her, you'll have to take us all." The crowd roared in agreement. Humans lifted their fists. Thryn raised their hands. The inspector's face twisted with anger. "You defy the Bureau?" Elira's voice rang out like steel. "We defy chains. We defy fear. We stand as equals." For a long moment, silence fell. The guards looked at each other nervously. The inspector saw it, their doubt, their hesitation, and he realized he had already lost. The retreat at last, the inspector lowered his hand. His voice was sharp but strained. "This is not over. The Bureau will not forget this treachery." With that, he turned sharply and marched away. The guards followed, but their steps lacked confidence. The moment they were gone, the square erupted with cheers. Humans and Thryn alike shouted, hugged, and lifted their voices to the night sky. Daniel stood stunned, his heart pounding. They had done it. They had stood against the overseers, and the overseers had retreated. Beside him, Elira stood tall, her blue eyes bright. For the first time, Daniel saw her smile, not small, not faint, but wide and real. The aftermath. The days that followed were tense but hopeful. The overseers did not return right away. Word spread quickly to other colonies. Rumors grew, of a Thrin who had said no, of a human who had stood beside her, of a crowd that defied the Bureau and lived. More and more workers began to question, to hesitate, to whisper about freedom. The spark had become a fire. In Daniel's home, gatherings continued, but now they were filled with laughter and determination. Humans and Thrin sat side by side, planning, sharing stories, dreaming of futures without chains. Daniel sometimes felt overwhelmed. He had never asked for this. Yet as he looked at Elira, he knew he had played a part. He had taught her the first lessons, but she had carried them far beyond what he imagined. A conversation at sunset one evening, Daniel and Elira stood outside watching the twin suns sink into the red desert. "You know," Daniel said softly, "when you first came here, I thought you'd just clean my floors and cook my meals. I never imagined this." Elira turned to him, her silver face glowing in the fading light. "Nor did I, but then I met you." Daniel chuckled. "Me? I didn't do much. You did everything," she replied firmly. "You gave me choice. You gave me courage. You gave me what my people never had before." He fell quiet, humbled by her words. "And now?"
He asked. "What happens now?"
Elira looked at the horizon, her eyes bright. "Now the galaxy changes, one colony at a time." The human answer as the stars filled the night sky. Daniel thought about the long path ahead. The Bureau would not give up easily. There would be more battles, more struggles, more risks. But he also thought about humanity, the strange, stubborn spirit that had carried them from Earth to the stars. The spirit that refused to bow, that fought even when the odds were impossible. And now that spirit lived in others too, in silver-skinned workers who once obeyed without question, but now spoke the word no with pride. Daniel realized that was the true answer humanity gave to the galaxy. Not weapons, not power, not wealth, but the idea that no chain was unbreakable, no master eternal, no fear too great. That was why the galaxy feared humanity. That was why it would one day respect them. Closing, Daniel turned to Elira and smiled. "Well, looks like I'm stuck with you." She tilted her head. "Stuck?" "Yeah," he said with a laugh. "But I wouldn't have it any other way." Elira's eyes glowed softly as she replied, "Nor would I." Together they stood under the endless stars, not as master and servant, not even as teacher and student, but as equals, two voices among many ready to shake the galaxy. And so it began, not with soldiers or weapons, but with a bold request from an alien maid, and the simple, stubborn answer of a human.